Okay, we'll call a meeting of the Bennington School Board for Wednesday, April 3rd session. First item, originally we had scheduled an executive session for the first item on the agenda, but what we're going to do is give citizens comment a 15-minute in case people are interested. So in case you have something to say and you don't want to hang around, you can be heard. So first item will be 15 minutes worth of citizens comment. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to say? Yes. Please give your name for the record.
I'm Caitlin Shaw. I'm the music teacher at Bennington Elementary School. And I'm going to read, but I'm speaking on behalf of the instrumental program in the Bennington School District. I truly feel privileged to work in this district because of how well the arts are supported. I really feel that way. I have been to other places where they are not well supported by the administration or the teachers or the school board, and in the 5 years that I've taught here, the school board has demonstrated several times during budget discussions how much you support the arts, and we really appreciate that. But I felt that it was important to let you know what would be lost if we were to lose the instrumental program. Studying an instrument, as you know, teaches dedication, it teaches perseverance, it encourages students to challenge themselves, it provides a place for them to make mistakes, a way for them to self-problem solve, to help themselves to learn. We approach problems in a different way. We don't just look at questions that have a concrete answer. We don't just focus on note reading and technical ability. We focus on emotion, we focus on expression. We look more in depth into what's happening in the music and how we can show that through what we're playing. Our families in Bennington work really hard, very hard, and they deserve public schools that provide instrumental instruction for their children. Private lessons are expensive. Instrument rentals are very expensive, and the school has many instruments that we already own and are not paying for anymore that we're able to loan to students on a yearly basis that don't cost them any money. Because our public schools have an instrumental program right now, students who wouldn't normally be able to take instrument lessons, wouldn't have the opportunity to do that, are able to do that in our schools. And by losing the instrumental program, we would take that opportunity away from them. So I just wanted to reiterate that and make sure that you knew. And I trust that you will continue to show your support for the arts as you have in the past. So,
is this part of your regular program, instrumental?
Yes, I teach general music, chorus, and band. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Anybody else? Yes.
Hello, my name is Ashley Raleigh. I am a parent. I have 2 children who attend Molly Stark Elementary School, and it was brought to my attention that there have been some issues with the budget as far as transportation. This came to my attention yesterday morning through an unfortunate event with my children. They are picked up in the morning by one of Dufour's Suburbans on Valentine Street and bused to Molly Stark. Their morning bus driver did not show up yesterday, so I had to bring them to school. And when I entered the school, I spoke with Miss Johnson, the assistant principal, who had explained to me that there was a plan for my children. However, she was unaware of what that plan was. So I stepped into her office with her, and unfortunately she couldn't contact Dufour on the phone. So being I'm aware of where their office is, I stopped in and I spoke with their manager, Mike, who explained to me that due to the budget and the fact that there is a regular school bus that passes our residence, that my children would ride the regular school bus instead of the Suburban in the morning, which is completely fine. Apparently, according to him, this decision had been made the previous Thursday, and Mrs. Mackenzie King, the principal of Molly Stark, was notified on Thursday of this change and was supposed to contact myself to make me aware so I'd know this is what needs to happen. Unfortunately, Mrs. Mackenzie King did not make me aware of the change, and as I was standing in the office at the DUFOR, she called, and I spoke to her, and she told me that she had been wanting to contact me, that she was supposed to have done it Friday, but it slipped her mind, and that then she was going to contact me Monday, and was just a tad bit too busy, so it slipped her mind again, and that she had dropped the ball. I already have a child who has attendance issues, and with this issue not being addressed properly and the school officials dropping the ball, it's not okay. And unfortunately, as they say, the buck was passed to the bus company until Mrs. Mackenzie King called me and admitted that it was on her and that she had dropped the ball and she should have contacted me sooner. And I just thought I would make it aware to you all that this is going on in our schools and that the higher up officials are just dropping the ball on important issues.
You're going to use the regular school bus from now on, your child?
Yes, yes, they're going to be taking the regular school bus from now on.
And they'll go into the development and then bring the youngster to school?
I'm sorry?
The bus stop is in the development, or?
No, it's
Yes,
available.
yes.
Well, let's let Jana.
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to that. I support everything that you have said. I'm not sure what I should comment on, but what you're saying is absolutely true. I called you, it had slipped my mind. There were special circumstances for your transportation
Right.
earlier on.
Right.
Which we always accommodated.
Right.
We also were going to accommodate a need for a different placement for your child to arrive in the afternoon that was not at your home. So I apologize publicly. I apologize to you on the phone. I told you it was not the bus company's issue. I had dropped the ball, and I own that. And I do, publicly. And I apologize again. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Has it been corrected now? Are we all set with it? Has it been corrected?
Absolutely, yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Anybody else under public comments?
Hi there, my name's Lori Mulhern. I'm a resident of Bennington, and I just want to encourage the board to really look carefully at the cuts that they are making in the budget, specifically in the areas of special education. We have brought numerous times these issues before the board, and some statements were made that we were putting things in place, but the first things that I see cut are a lot of special education items. And, you know, we were hoping to put this together so that we were trying to correct a lot of problems. And unfortunately, to see it be some of the first line items cut is very disappointing, because we have to make sure that we are following special education law, as well as accommodating those with special needs, and also providing FAPE to each and every student in our district. And I encourage you to think very carefully about the areas that you are looking to cut funds, because these children do need the support. And I think we can do a much better job about being really effective with the funds that we do have. So I'm going to say that. And the other thing I would like to encourage is to certainly exhaust, you know, any kind of resource, which is, you know, that we can tap into, whether it be going to the state, whether it be tapping into grants. I mean, we really need to become aggressive if we're going to support this educational system. You know, this happens every day. You know, you lose the funding, you got to find it somewhere else. And if the community can't support it, then where else can we find it? And, you know, not being really aggressive in that area, you know, it's going to hurt in the long run. But also, you know, I just do express, please be very careful where you're cutting those funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie?
Lori, I was in Montpelier last week because part of the governor's budget was to cut, it's 2.5 million out of developmental disabilities. And I talked to all of our senators and all our representatives, and number one, there was only one that was aware that this was in the governor's budget. But make a long story short, the House has passed it. So there will be a 2.5 million budget cut if the Senate goes along with what the representatives have done.
Right, I have attended those meetings. I have gone to Vermont Interactive TV to have my input into those cuts specifically. I just came from a visa meeting, actually, that they were trying to just sort of I was trying to hook up with that organization as well, just to keep on top of where these cuts are impacting the community. And it's across the board. I mean, it really puts on developmental services from the designated agency we have here. But a lot of the students with special needs have been relying on those services in a variety of areas, not just outside of the educational system. Sometimes it's tied into the educational system, and when we don't have that, we have to make sure that we're picking it up in other areas, because it will affect their education.
And I was basically told that if I thought it was bad this year, it's going to be a lot worse for us next year, even educational-wise, because the senators that I know, well, the two senators that I know, and the representatives all know that I'm on the school board, and they said, you think you're having a tough time now, it's going to be worse next year.
And then again, I just encourage every resource to be exhausted. We have to become aggressive. There's no doubt about that.
Ken, in view of the fact that Lori's made her comments, would it not be appropriate for Catherine to tell the group that's here tonight and the board on the coverage that we now have in view of all that we have going on in special ed and how we're covering it? It's been in the paper and everything, but maybe it'd be good with this group that we have tonight to explain the coverage that we have in this interim period.
Sure. It doesn't exactly relate to what Lori was saying, except that we do need support for our special educators and our special ed administrators, our principals, and our students. It's really important that we do that at all times. Lori, I agree, we should be aggressive about looking for grants and other funding sources as we move forward, especially, as Jackie has said, if we are facing additional cuts. Our current coverage out of the supervisory union, it's really important to know that supervisory union coverage for special education is to give support and oversight to the special education services delivered in the schools and the other alternative sites. And we now have several individuals that have stepped up to keep the continuum of that service going, and I thank them for their volunteering and their helping to plan that coverage. I'd like to thank Rick Pembroke for the area of finance, transportation, Medicaid, Karen Burnell, who has a special education background, for coverage of Molly Stark, Pownell, Woodford, Shaftesbury, North Bennington, the grant and state reporting, and Woodford. Donna Colley, who also has a special education background, has stepped up to volunteer to help with Bennington Elementary, Monument, the high school, the middle school, the out-of-district placements, and all of the related services. Marie Schutz is giving oversight to the personnel issues, which might be leaves or payroll issues. Emily is still the administrative assistant, is still doing her job. The building facilitators in the schools are still doing their jobs. That would be Mary Nevin at the middle school, Dawn Campbell here in Bennington schools, and Wendy Pierce at the high school, and Donna Leap is giving oversight to and support for professional development scheduling in the special education area, as well as the conference requests and leave forms. And the principals have been wonderful about supporting the smooth transition for those in the room. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
It's all fine, well, and good that we have these people covering, but it's my understanding they had full-time jobs that they were extremely busy at before, so I want to know how they were able to do the job of 2.5 people
It's extraordinary effort. There's a lot of flexing of time, but mostly out of school time, well into the evening, I can assure you. And it's a temporary
Lady up back.
service, we're hoping to resolve these issues and move on as quickly as we can. But I appreciate in the interim. I have contacted 2 retired special educators to see if they could come in and provide assistance. One is still considering and the other was not able to, so we're still pursuing that. And that would relieve them of some of the works. So it's additional work, it's being done late at night and whenever we can squeeze them in.
Is there anybody else under public comments? Yes.
Hi, my name's Amy Dobson. I'm a parent of 2 students at Monument Elementary. And I would like to see if the board can comment on any plans they may have for communicating with the community about maybe putting forth the same budget again, because I don't think the community was informed at all about federal money that was being lost, any state money that was being lost, what the 19.9% increase year over year really means to the schools, and what's going to happen if it has to go down to 9.9% or if it has to stay flat, what that's going to mean for the community for cuts. So if the board, I'd love to hear if you are considering putting forth that budget again, and if so, I think that as a community member, and from what I'm hearing from people, I think there's room for education, and I think there's room for letters in the mailboxes and real education about why we need this 19% or if it's 15% or whatever it is. I think there needs to be I think there's goodwill out there, we just need to find it, and I think that the board can do that with help from the community. Thank you.
It's worthwhile to note that at their last board meeting, the members of this board did talk about that. In fact, it's on the task list, that as you come forward with a budget that you settle in on for a revote, that there would be opportunities for going to meetings, mailings, letters to the editor. I believe Claude and Jackie had made a point about that. So there's definitely that effort ready to be given wherever they land. And I believe that when we get into the budget discussion, Ken, there'll be plenty of time for board members to comment on what's happening in the process of the budget cuts. There is some urgency about it because, of course, we do need to get a budget out for a revote. We're holding, as everyone knows, transition plans and classroom assignments for paraprofessionals. So I think I want to make sure that everyone here knows that the board is well aware of the urgency and the seriousness of this. And I'd like, at this point, it's a great time for me to thank the principals and Rick for really delving into the budget to respond to the requests of the board members at their last meeting.
Anybody else?
My name is Tara Sky. I had a question about the teacher contract. If you guys are considering, with the budget cuts, leaving any staff behind or letting any staff go. I know that I keep getting information that it's June 30th you have to get a budget by, but April 15th is when you have to decide if you're not renewing contracts. So it doesn't seem like you have as long as you do. Okay.
We have a reduction in force that's done by May 15th, and we have notified teachers employed by the SVSU board, which would be most of the special ed teachers, related service teachers. Also, BSD teachers, classroom teachers, have been notified that there is an anticipation of a reduction in force. And then for a separate reason, North Bennington, because they have not, the Prudential Committee has not yet decided whether or not they are going to close the school and lease to the village schools. So we do a reduction in force. Those letters are due May 15th. So it's not a matter of a non-renewal of teachers. It's a matter of a reduction in force where teachers are allowed to be on a recall list for 2 years. So that's the process.
So you've already done that, is what
Well,
you're
we
saying.
haven't noticed specific teachers of reduction in force, but we gave a general alert letter to all of the teaching employees at Bennington School District and SVSU, employed by SVSU, that we anticipate reductions in force because we do not know where this budget vote will go. So we
Okay,
gave them a notice there will be reductions in force, but those specific reductions are not due to them until May 15th. So there is some time here.
Okay, so I just want to, my opinion is that you don't reduce your force. Clearly, class sizes have already gone up. Teachers are responsible for, I know my daughter's in a class of 20 students. She's in first grade. There's no para. I don't know how you expect, if you reduce staff, same number of kids or more come into your schools, you're going to have larger class sizes, and I already see you have this many issues with special ed that have come out. I don't know how you expect to reduce your number of issues, administrative complaints, so on, by reducing the staff responsible for helping you make sure that the kids are, education are important.
They are.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else on public comments?
Hi, folks. I'd just like to say I didn't vote for the last school budget, but I will vote for the next one. I think it's imperative that you bring it down a little bit, but I don't think you should bring it down to where you're going to cut special ed, and you're going to cut all the programs that the kids need. What I'm here to say is I hope you do some forums to educate the rest of the public about what you need to do. I'll gladly do some cat TV shows with you people one-on-one if you want to. But I'm tired of seeing in the paper and seeing on the select board and all of these studies that our community does. They always rave about how good we need to make our education system, and yet every time you turn around, the select board doesn't fund it. It's their job to raise the grand list and bring tax money, tax stabilization packages to our community so that we can afford a good education system. It's time that we start putting the blame, if you want to, not on the school board, but on the select board, the administration of our town. They're the ones that won't raise the grand list. They're the ones that create a town plan that makes it so nobody wants to come to Bennington. And it's time that this board stick up for itself. And I hope you do, not only just the BSD board, but the MAU, because Bennington does pay 70% of MAU. We can't have a good quality education system if you can't have money to fund it. You people have been taking a black eye year after year. And it's come down now to the point where I think it's ridiculous. Where I saw on TV today, special ed with autism, the cost is going to go up. There was a gentleman on there who I spoke to a few years ago, Mr. Wright, who started Autism Speaks. And he was on one of the programs, I can't remember if it was CNN or one of the other ones. And the number for autism is now 1 in 88, I believe. One kid out of every 88 is going to have some form of autism. They don't know how they're going to deal with it. And we need to face up to special needs in this community. And for too long, I don't think we have. And I hope you don't cut the budget that way. You can cut some. There's always some waste or something like that you can do, but not on special ed. And I do think this town needs to address where we're going so we can finance our school system better than just putting on the backs of the people that are here. We need to allow new businesses to come in. And our town isn't going to grow if we don't. So thank you, and I'll help you if you need it through forums or columns I write or anything else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none,
No, Ken, I was just going to say, there's a large group here. We're going to be at one executive session, but explain it.
Yeah, they were going to executive session. 2 items.
we had warned on our meeting at the beginning that we're going to be going into executive session. We have some representatives from the SVSU that are going to be taking some information from us as well as a personnel item. So hopefully 15 minutes we can get through this and we'll come right back. I'm sorry, but some business has to get taken care of. Do we have a motion to go into executive
So
session?
moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay.
might as well leave these papers right here.
Yeah.
Next meeting, we're gonna meet 6 to 7 as a board to do your evaluation. Executive session at 7 to start. Regular meeting at 7. Two evaluations. You have all 3 done?
Thank you. No. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your patience. A lot of work was done in a short time. Okay,
You said that.
second item on the agenda is task list status for March 18th.
We had at the March 18th meeting a member of the public who had a letter of quite extensive questions, everything about how the SU budgets are made or built, about grants that were secured for early education, for our preschool Act 62 partner program, how we seek bids, personnel staffing clarifications, also the change in the makeup of the SU board, and I just want to let the board members know that she did have her questions answered. There was also a question about preventative maintenance and training with specifically adaptive PE equipment throughout the supervisory union, but I did check specifically at the building that was in question, and Jim Marston has said that they check this every month, and the manuals are accessible. There was a particular activity on the piece that loosened a piece of the equipment, and corrective adaptations have been put in place. So that's been, there's a planned correction for that, so they will be changing, modifying that piece of equipment so that it will prevent this from happening again. But they are checked actually once a month, and the manuals are accessible. There was a question about scheduling of transition meetings and assignments for teachers and support staff. And I think we've already mentioned, I mentioned earlier in the meeting, the urgency of getting a budget together and out for a vote, because a successful vote will allow us to start our transition planning for students and give assignments to staff. There was a question about the entire federal reimbursement that was promised for special ed and how that is distributed throughout the state. I actually plan to ask the Agency of Education actually to answer that, because it's not a direct through the state to the districts. There's some monies that are appropriated for the state use, so we'll get that hopefully for your next meeting. And then supporting and selling the budget ideas had come up at the last meeting, meeting with AARP, letters to the editor, radio. Mr. Bethel has mentioned the forums, and that's it from the last meeting.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
Okay, next item are financial reports. First, the treasurer's reports. Renee brought in the treasury report for us. If you have any questions of Renee, she is here.
Here. We are pretty much where we typically are this time of the year. We have received our final installment of the tax collection turnover from the town. Of the money that you see available in the cash balance, 2.1 million of that is what I had to borrow to sustain us through the fall, and we typically operate in the red. So that money will be going back to Merchants Bank on June 28th. So just want to keep that in mind. We will have our final installment of state aid coming in at the end of this month as well. So that will help offset the last installment that we have for the SVSU assessment, which is in the current warrant tonight. And then also helps cover lumps in June for the teacher's salaries and for this summer.
Any questions of Renee? Seeing none, can we have a motion to accept
So
the
moved.
treasurer's report?
Second it.
Second. All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we also have a budget status report. Either you picked it up online or a hard copy, and if you have any questions, you can ask the rec. Okay, under personnel, there's none. Next item is the consent agenda.
Ken,
Yes.
I would like to recommend an executive session before we do anything on the consent agenda. Personnel problem.
Can we just pull those
Number 6?
2 items off and vote on the rest of it, the minutes
Perfectly fine.
and about warrants?
I can't vote on warrants because there's a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, she'll just abstain then. Okay, can we have then a motion to accept the consent agenda without the 2 nominations?
I'll make a...
Second?
Can we have a first and a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Abstain, 1 abstention, Jackie. Okay, thank you. Policies, there's none. Okay, now we're on old business, the fiscal 14 budget work session.
Big Rick?
The board would be so kind, I would like to actually quickly go through the redistricting first, because it actually plays a role into the budget process. I don't think it would take too long, if that's okay.
Yep.
That's fine. This is fine.
So as the board approved, I think, December, January, a plan, and I figured there'd be a few people here, but I don't think I've share. For those on TV. With combination of shifting of our population and our class sizes policy that changed about 1.5 years ago, I think, maybe 2 years ago. We saw some very significant variances in class sizes throughout the district at various buildings. So the board authorized us to do a redistricting plan. The approach that we took, and these aren't equal factors, they're actually progressively important factors. First one being to balance the class sizes across the district. We wanted to look at minimal impact on families. And finally, we wanted to establish some more efficient bus routes, because our bus routes have gotten convoluted with kids attending multiple schools from same neighborhoods for a whole host of reasons. This plan has been tweaked many times, and as recently as 10 o'clock this morning, we put the final blessing on how we're going to approach this. And the best way for me to describe it is the darker colors are changing zones. And the way our software works is we've designed neighborhood cells around natural geographical boundaries for the town of Bennington. As an example, the covered bridges, we can't legally put a bus over from a DOT standpoint, because when they're loaded, they exceed the weight. So clearly we have a natural boundary that we have to abide by. There's a lot of those around the community, as we all know. So we have something like 80 different neighborhood cells in our software, and we can pick and choose and move. What we've done is, for those of you who have a small paper and one's on TV, this is one cell that's moving from the monument zone into Bennell. There are 2 zones here moving from Bennington Elementary to the monument. These, it's hard to see, but there's actually 2 large zones. As you can imagine, these cells get progressively larger as you leave the center of town because of the population of kids. And I think this one cell, I think there's 6 kids. There's a huge area, which is not a lot of students. So that has produced what the principals, I think, are happy with. As far as proposed class sizes throughout the buildings, and this is where it has the effect on the budget. And as we talked, when the board approved the redistricting plan a few months back prior to the budget season, it clearly has saved us a teacher, saved us from having to hire a teacher. So that saved on the budget. And as you look at this, and Donna McKenzie can speak to it, actually all the principals can speak to it, but particularly Donna McKenzie. The kindergarten at Molly Stark, we're looking at some numbers, and here, Brianna, help me out. I think we've got 152 identified kindergartners and 120 have registered. So that affects somewhere in that ballpark? Am I close?
I've been on a couple days this week, so I lost you.
Any of that, there's still a large pocket of kids that haven't signed up, haven't registered. And that kindergarten, that 5th kindergarten class right now, what we're going to ask the board is, we have a retirement at Monument. And we have in the budget a new hire for a 3rd kindergarten here at Bennell. So there's 2 theoretical openings in our staffing pattern. We're going to ask the board, as we did last year, to authorize that 5th kindergarten at Molly Stark. Still within our staffing pattern. It's not growing the staff other than what we had planned, because it's still going to be 21 classrooms at Molly Stark. But we won't hire that until we have confirmation that we have a full kindergarten student population that justifies that need. So that was a very brief overview. The principals want to weigh in at all, or did I miss something?
No, that was
No,
generally it.
You did a good job. And the other thing that you might have been referring to with Molly Stark, historically, the last few years, we have received anywhere from 8 to 12, 13, 14 kindergartners from August on, so kids we didn't know about that moved in. So that's the other reason that we certainly want to make sure that if, in fact, we get that population coming in, we're going to be okay with it. And again, it does not grow the number of teachers at Molly Stark, because the redistricting enabled us to have fewer classrooms in 1st and 2nd grade.
Donna, on those moving in August, on the other, flip that, do we also lose a few over the summer?
We do lose a few, but historically, we gain more than we lose. It's not an even swap.
All right.
Any questions? I mean, the letters, if they didn't go out today, are going to be going out the next day or two. Only 11% of the students, based on my last calculation, I don't know how many families are being affected, but only 11% of the students are being affected. So it's not a large number.
Oh, I guess this question is for our superintendent, and for the audience too. Adjustments can be made. If there is a situation of a parent that's here or listening, and something comes up as a result of this redistricting, they can in turn contact the superintendent, plead their case.
So, George, that's an excellent question, because a lot of people are confused about the school choice with No Child Left Behind, and it's a good point for me to make tonight in this discussion of the redistricting, that a few years ago we had school choice within the Bennington schools, whereby Bennell and Monument met the AYP designation and No Child Left Behind, so students from Molly could ask to move into Bennell and then or into Monument if they wanted to under No Child Left Behind. Now that all of our schools are in the schools in need of improvement, that option is no longer available. So that is not part of the school choice anymore. And so we've really gone back to analyze the approvals of students who are in schools. The No Child Left Behind students will remain because that was the commitment made, but no siblings would be added. So that's a consideration families will need to make. And yes, George, there's always the compelling reason, and I really have to emphasize it must be a compelling reason if you feel that your child should attend a different school. And we really are very strict about researching and considering compelling reasons. We make very few changes. It really has to be a compelling manner, but the opportunity is still there to write a letter and request. What we will do as well, this is a great time to also let parents know that if they had a previous request for a compelling reason that was approved, we are asking that a new letter be written, and the principals will be contacting those families to let them know they need to write a new letter, just so that we're all starting from the same place in the redistricting. Oh, I'm sorry. A reminder, thank you, Donna McKenzie. Fifth graders have an option to remain where they are. The fourth graders going into fifth grade have an option to remain where they are as well. So I think for families, there'll be a couple situations where the younger siblings will need to go to a new area, but the older ones could stay, and families are going to have to make that choice about whether they request a move to the new attendance zone for all of the students. So there'll be those conversations.
I just looked up quickly the registration listings, and we were very close. It's going to be confirmed, so that we're targeting the female still families that need to get the registration copies. So if listening when you have it, please to us ASAP.
There's a public service announcement. Dial screenings are happening when?
Friday, April 26th in Monument.
So if
It's our first.
If you haven't received a letter and you think your kindergartner's going to school next year and you don't have a date for dial screening, it's because you haven't filed some paperwork with the school district in order to take that next step. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Ends my public service announcement for the night.
Get your paperwork in.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I was just going to say, there's some parents here, and if they've got a question about this, don't be bashful. Now's the time to bring it up.
I don't think Kenny Bennington area went. Dewey.
Oh, it's the upper end.
Dewey and Grant Street.
Do you know the number of that? I mean, is that information posted for parents?
It will.
Get a letter.
Yes.
The letter.
It's not easily posted because it's a very large database.
Right.
But if a parent has a concern, who to call? I don't want to get my number on this.
Well, would the principals field those?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the principals can field those questions. If you think you could ask your current principal to help field those questions. They can call Rick as well.
And the letters are going out tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah, but you can
They've been
call
finalized.
central office 447-7501. And someone can help, the buildings can help.
Yep.
There's multiple people that, if somebody has a direct question, we can give them a direct answer on a specific address.
Does this plan keep all BSC students in the district or not negotiating?
Right.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
So, the lead into the budget conversation, you had multiple documents. I don't know Hopefully you all had a chance to review them electronically. I apologize, I didn't bring any hard copies with me. The detail that I wanted to go over tonight, and we can really go in whatever direction excuse me, the board wants to take this in. But I really want to go over that priority reductions list in detail. The board gave us directive to bring the budget in at a less than 10% increase over this year's budget, if I said that correctly. And we've accomplished that. We've accomplished that in what we, and when I say we, I'm talking everybody that was on that memo, Catherine, Donna, the principals, Karen Burnell, myself. I think that covers all of us. Multiple meetings. Actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a step back and thank and compliment the three principals and Karen Burnell. They put in some yeoman work, largely around the area of special education. They really dug into the entire special ed department as it relates to the BSD, and I think Donna Colley's going to talk in more details, but I can't compliment them enough for the hours they put in really looking at every aspect. The details of the IEPs, the students, the buildings, the teachers, and all the various components that go into that program. So I can't compliment them enough on the work they put in on that. One thing on a typographical error that's on that reduction sheet, or at least I think it is. I got so many accounting things taking place here that I confuse myself once in a while. But on that far right-hand column where it says in yours it says running budget percent decrease, it really should be increase. And what I mean by that, and it's kind of an oxymoron here, but as we make reductions, and actually the first line you see is actually an increase. You see a negative 26, but my accounting mind tells me that's actually an increase in the budget, which moves the budget up to 19.23 in the far right-hand column. The increase over this year's budget is up to 19.23. And then with each reduction after that, you see that number come down. So when you get to the very bottom, you're at 9.85% increase, proposed increase over FY13's budget. What we've done is we're going to have different people speak to different line items here. Donna Colley has graciously accepted the challenge to speak to all the special ed issues. So I'm going to let her start with the special. Oh, the other thing is the detail, and hopefully my memo was somewhat helpful to you. There's two details in there. The first detail you see is the 2 pages. That's your special ed budget that's within the SVSU. That's not in your budget. That flows through to your budget through the assessments. Those four assessment lines are largely that one assessment line in your local budget. The rest of it is the details. I didn't give you all the past actuals because you have that in previous budgets. If you want it going forward, I could give it to you, but I tried to keep it short and simple. It just shows from this year's budget to what our new proposed next year's budget is. And this sheet we're going to talk about is really the difference from the budget that failed to the budget that we're now talking about. Does that make sense, or did I really confuse everybody? All right. Donna, you're first up.
Okay. So if I miss anything on sped transportation, because I know that you are an equal entity about working with DU4 on this, but we were able to meet as an administrative team and Mike DuFour and really solidify contractual busing versus individual buses, shore up reasons for children being able to group on buses or needs for individual buses, and able to do that. We were unfortunately, this one I believe is the increase, and also about some private transportation for students who may need special transportation out of district. So that's why you see that bit of an increase there. Okay? But we are working on it, and we're kind of, we've spent a lot of time with Mike Dufour on this. Do you want me to, excuse me? I mean, Mike, yes, I'm sorry, Mike Gardner.
So we had to, you know, unfortunately, we had to go backward before we could go forward. And, you know, this was a reality of us digging into the details and realizing that, well, wait a minute, we don't have enough money to deliver the services that we need to deliver. So we had to increase that. I think it would be better if we just take one at a time and see if there's any other questions on each individual line item, because although this one's fairly simple, they're going to get a little more detailed going down through. Any questions on this line item? Health insurance, I think most people know, the audience may not know. It's been a very cumbersome year budgeting for health insurance increases. A typical cycle is we'll have that number by the end of December. VHI will give us a hard not to exceed number. Very easy for budgeting. We know what it is. We plug it in. This year, as a result of the Affordable Care Act and the state's subsequent legislation that ties to that, in reality, it's still, the rate is still not set, but the most recent directive we've got from VHI is it won't exceed 11%. And that just came a week and a half ago, I think. What I had in the budget previously was the previous not to exceed number, which was 14.9, I averaged to 15%. So that $39,000 your savings you're seeing there is a result of new information that we received from our insurance provider. Any questions on that? Bond interest, I think this is pretty simple. When the budget failed, the board made it pretty adamant that we weren't going to move any forward on a construction project. And so that's actually the next two lines. And the Board of Ed consultants were the architectural fees that we had budgeted. So those two very easily came off the table. Any questions on those two?
I didn't know what the Board of Ed consultant was. I was going to ask what that was.
Horizontal move, small number, but I think it wasn't the intent for this to be the case, but I think it demonstrates the fact that we literally looked at every line and, you know, took every dollar we think that we thought that we could take. What a horizontal move is, under the teacher's contract, once they achieve certain number of additional education credits, they're able to move horizontally on the grid, and they'll get a corresponding salary increase associated with that. Last few years, we've been budgeting, I think it was a fairly flat number. I don't have it in front of me, but so I look back at what we had been, our actual expenses and how many actual moves, and it's ranged from 3 to 11 horizontal moves in the last few years. So I just took the average of what it ended up, I think it was 5, and so it resulted in this, you know, 3,700. 12 people show up and have those courses, you got to pay them. So we'll have to take the money out of contingency or something. But it's just, it's a couple dollars that we save. Any questions on that one? I'm not going to monopolize this whole thing, but it just happened to be my priority, my spots in the list here. Kitchen net. For those of you that have been on the board for a few years, you know that we have a very successful food service program that produces cash for us to replace equipment. Part of that program is the district has to pick up 50% of that purchase. So if we're buying a new stove at $10,000, you'll pay $5,000, the food service pays $5,000. We get a new piece of equipment, it's owned by you, and you're required to maintain it. We've done a good job over the last 5 or 6 years. The kitchens are in pretty good shape. So, you know, we talked to the Abbey Group, and they were comfortable with us, you know, not having money in there for new purchases. However, you'll see in there the new purchase money I took out, I put some into repairs because I didn't want to take it all. If we're not going to be replacing some equipment, I need to have some flexibility to be able to repair some things as they come across. So that's why it says net. It's those two line items. I've taken all of the new purchases out, put a couple dollars into repairs, and you're seeing a net savings of $11,800. Any questions on that one? I'm getting out of this easy.
How much do we typically spend on repairs of equipment?
I could look it up for you. It's probably between $5,000 and $10,000 a year. Be my ballpark guess. But I can get you a number for that next. Actually, I can get it to you while Jerry's the next one up. If he can. Actually, I'm free for a couple lines here. I'll look it up. Any other questions on the kitchen? Gary?
Okay, my part is, as you are aware, that I have a personnel so we're talking about not rehiring somebody until maybe halfway into next year to free up, some of the money for payroll plus benefits and things like that. So you can see it's about $15,000. That's my info. It won't be easy. It's easier in the summertime to cover for people because you don't have people out. But if I have people out when we get into the school year, we have a rough one here, it'll be a little more difficult. But we'll do what we have to do to try and make it. Questions?
Is that reduction going to cause any jump in the contracted custodial stuff?
No. No.
Anything else?
So the next item is special ed out-of-district placements. So again, as an administrative team and with a review of all of our out-of-district placement students, we reviewed who they were, verified them, and came upon that we had one extra placement that was not needed, and that's where our savings is, that line. Questions? The next one below it is special ed contracted services. Again, upon review of programs throughout the Bennington School District, we reviewed those services and programs and determined that one of our self-contained programs is actually functioning very well, and that the third-party provider program that was previously considered was not going to be necessary. And if you look at the number, it's 161,000 savings, but there still is 90,000 remaining in the budget for contracted services, which is still going to provide us with very important consultation, training of staff, regular and special ed staff members, and that will be to support our students with disabilities who are in the mainstream. Any questions? Yes.
You said it was for a program that we no longer need. Is that what you meant?
No. That total was 251,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. And it was a combination of services. It was first presented in our past budget as a third-party partner program for one of our self-contained programs, in addition to consultation, training for staff members for students in the mainstream, two separate groups of children. And so upon review of that separate program, we're really feeling like that is running well. The program runs well with the amount of staff and amount of support staff that they have in there, but we're still going to be able to provide consultation from a third-party partner for both training, consultation, not only for the self-contained program, but also for our mainstream students. We're going to get training for our regular teachers and our special education teachers, and we felt that that would be sufficient. So that does leave us with a savings of $161,000.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
I'm speaking about the Acorns program. That's currently a self-contained program within Bennington Elementary School, but we also have many students that are in the mainstream.
Board of Ed contingency. As most of you know, the contingency is largely there for special ed purposes when a student moves into the district mid-year. This district in particular has seen 3 or 4 years back, not too distant past, where a residentially placed student moved into the district. I don't think we ever even saw the student. It was sizable. It was a sizable expense for a couple of years. And those things happen. And we're nervous about this. It drops it from 125 down to 100. We're just, again, looking for anything we can possibly get to get to that number. We think that this is a spot we had to go to.
Okay, the next item is contracted services. That's an area in which we often contract with outside agencies or organizations for things like formative assessment, which is a way of training staff members on how to use different strategies and techniques within the classroom that are research-based. Positive behavior training would be possibly a contracted service from that area. Response to intervention, which I know we are beginning to look at here. If we were to need some training or consultation, it would come out of a contracted service line. That is not the tech training that with the tablets that we're getting. That's separately funded, so that is a kind of a safe piece at this moment. We also use that line for truancy when we need to contact the Sheriff's Department to follow up on students not coming to school. Sometimes for 504 services, which are federally mandated but not federally funded. Sometimes services are needed to either train staff or support students with those needs. And unfortunately, Four Winds is also within that contract service line. So we would be looking at reducing $20,000 from that. Questions? The next line, regular subs. That line primarily, I believe, is used to support the contracted service line in the sense that teachers need to be out of their classrooms, usually in groups, so that the contracted service providers can provide actual training, answer questions, offer direct instruction for groups of teachers. Then we have subs in the classroom so that the kids aren't alone. So we've reduced that line item by $15,000. It will have an effect in the sense of it will reduce our possible span of services that we can provide, but the money has to come from somewhere. Questions? And the next is crossing guards. Bennell currently is the only school that has outside hired contracted people to provide crossing services at the school. We've reduced that. Parents, for the most part, pick their children up. We release kids to their parents unless we have made communications with the family that someone else will be picking them up or they'll be walking home. But for the most part, there are parents who show up and we identify and turn over. So there are crosswalks. We have looked at that being a way to save approximately $10,000. So there would no longer be crossing guards here.
Jim, excuse me, am I interrupting?
No.
Jim, is there staff within the school and janitorial or anything that can be used anywhere on these busy intersections to cover for this, or are we just saying no?
At this point, we're just saying no. Whether there would be staff gets to be somewhat of a complicated issue in that we would be needing to look at the contracts that govern people and their time schedules, whether they be teachers or paraprofessionals or maintenance staff. I would say it is unlikely, but I wouldn't say it's not possible. But I would lean towards it's probably not going to be something that could happen, but we'd have to look more specifically before I gave you a definitive answer.
All right.
You say you're the only school that has it?
Through outside contracted or hired people. Our
If we're not
custodian.
filling the position that's being vacated at Molly, who's going to do it at Molly?
Well, what ends up being a little bit different at Molly is that the custodian does do the crossing morning and afternoon at the bottom of our driveway on Orchard Road, crossing over to Willow Brook.
That isn't retiring?
And that individual is retiring, that position is being backfilled by a current person, and that position's not being filled until October. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
There'll be somebody in there.
Are we liable if a child gets hit by a car crossing the street?
I do not believe so. They're not on our property.
Don't we have a safety patrol? Is that?
We do not have a safety patrol here, but that's something that we could look at. I'd be a little bit hesitant in that we would be giving responsibility out on the street to people without adult supervision, potentially. So I'd be more reluctant to go there than I would with changing staff.
Jim, we did used to have safety patrols.
Oh, I absolutely believe that.
Yeah.
But that was a time where litigation was much less.
Maybe we could press the PTGs and volunteers. Anyway, all right, let's move there.
Sixth grade.
Next, Rick.
That's me. District-wide building equipment, that's anything from mowers to vehicles to what I call floating inventory, that's tables and chairs that we bring out to the other schools. That will affect how much I buy. Hopefully we can make It just means that we'll get less. I mean, if I wanted to buy, let's say, replacement chairs for the chairs, I would be able to get about $95 a chair. It's and for instance, I'm using that it's kind of replaced. You know, what I'm just trying to say is this, we feel the picture of everything we hope to reading and break down this thing.
What are you left with in your budget? What are you left, or is that all?
Nope. No, there's 30.
The next item is something I'm going to speak to. That's other sped staff oops,
You
sorry.
missed one, Donna.
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. You have two.
Yeah, there's a district-wide educational equipment. Actually, I was hoping you would speak to it, because it's really your guys' stuff, but I'll be more than happy. This is largely, and it goes back, first of all, $40,000 of that line item, and it's now down to $80,000. We added it, we dropped it to 80. The original 90 of that $50,000 was for the Puno, the lease payment on the Puno netbooks that are going out of the building. And It's a 3-year lease, as you recall. When we structured that lease, we were able to structure and get that payment in $40,000. So that was largely where that savings is. The rest of that equipment line is used for outfitting the classrooms. We're going to have to buy 2 new kindergarten classrooms if our population shows up. So we're going to have to outfit those classrooms. And as this board saw, we probably ought to bring it back because a lot of new members since we last talked about it. We have some very aging equipment in the classrooms, and this helps replace some of those as they get tired and old. So that's what's that?
That's one of those reports that I asked you
for. So that's largely that.
Okay, so other special ed staff compensation, this encompasses overtime and substitutes for special ed staff. And again, upon review of our needs of our children and programs, instead of paying staff paraeducators at times overtime if they're needed for the differential of that extra half hour, because there's a difference, we've been paying them overtime. So what we've done instead is grow their contract by a half an hour, and it alleviates that overtime pay. So we then have a savings. Questions about that?
There's also
Additional?
some sped subs that are in there.
Substitutes.
That are in there. I think it's largely the sped subs that is the savings.
Right. Those are the 2 items. Okay. 3 special ed paraeducators, again, through that audit and looking at our programming and a very specific process in this case, not only the redistricting process supported this decrease or savings, but also the review of services for students that are needed. We currently look at our 5th graders who will be moving on to the middle school, support staff that we have for them, and then we also analyze our incoming kindergartners with the help of Karen Brunel and their needs. So we're looking at a savings of 3 special ed para positions. Questions about that?
The sped paras, their seniority list goes throughout the SDSU, right?
Well, these were new hires. These aren't people. These were new hires that were put in the last budget.
Additional. So they're not
people that are
These aren't
presently with
bodies.
us.
These are new positions.
Right.
We don't believe we need them.
So no one will be losing.
And looking at the structure of
Yeah.
providing the services.
Very detailed analysis. And the last one that I'm going to speak to is the special ed professional staff, and Rick, please join in and help me with this one. This really encompasses the facilitator and halftime special ed position, correct? And the reduction of that, those 2, offsets the cost of, which we still have in the budget, the very specific position of our board-certified behavior analyst that we recommended, and also an occupational therapist and a speech-language pathologist to work for those students in the mainstream, which really connects to also that extra $90,000 for our training, our consultation for those staff members. So that's really to focus on those children with autism in our programs.
If I remember right, we had a presentation, or we were asked at one time, we had OT with numbers of what, 70 students? We're not keeping it at that by reducing this.
No.
We're hiring I don't want to contradict Donna, but the OT and the SLP aren't part of this. Those were in the original budget. They're still in the budget. We're hiring one FTE OT, and we're hiring an additional one FTE SLP.
Okay.
Those were in the original, they stay in. This line item is a compilation of 3 positions. It was a BSD SPED facilitator for the 3 buildings and a half-time teacher. Those 2 positions, help me if I'm get off track here, those 2 positions are not needed if the SVSU maintains their district-wide facilitator.
Yes.
Okay, what's the facilitator do?
Well, just let me finish. So those 2 are reductions, and then we're going to add in this BCBA?
Yes. Board, you got it right. You have the right initials, the Board Certified Behavior Analyst. And I mentioned that because I want individuals to understand that there was very specific discussion about supporting those students with autism in the mainstream. And so we still have that in there. That is in our budget, to have that Board Certified Behavior Analyst and that OT that you spoke about and that SLP. Just wanted to make sure that people didn't think that that was something that was being cut.
I still have questions.
Okay.
How many people will the OT consider?
That one specific OT is supposed to work as a team. They will work within the 3 BSD schools to focus on those children in the mainstream with autism.
You have more than one, but what do you have now?
Well, we have currently 1 point.
We have other OT services.
Yes.
You guys come off the top of your head.
I think it's 1.4. It's either 1.2 or 1.4 combination.
Well, while you're looking that up, I just want to be sure that we're not cutting off our nose here in this, especially in this area of special ed. The administration, you're assuring us that we've got proper coverage for the programs and the improvements that we're looking for. I want to know what a SPED facilitator.
I think this is a first step to designing supports for students with autism in the mainstream. So it's our first step. I think we all know from the education we've received about this special needs that each individual student's profile is very different and unique, and it changes with age. So we're still working with feedback from parents, from our professionals about what the ideal program would look like. George, this is the first step to really provide a team approach to consult and to work with these children in the 3 schools in the mainstream. So it's a first step. I wouldn't say it's the ideal step.
And leaving that focus of that there is that team approach with a board-certified behavior analyst.
Right, that's the other key piece.
With the addition of an occupational therapist and a speech-language pathologist who will work as a team, who are really focused on these children who do have autism in the mainstream. That's really that's the big change.
And it's a change.
So what, from a change perspective, it's kind of a restructure.
It's part of restructure.
Part of a restructure of how you're looking at providing services. With this, how does it affect the other general population of SPED?
It's additional. Those services are still there. This is in addition to.
So the SPED facilitator, what were they? I guess that's.
I don't think we answered that question.
The facilitator currently is someone who works for us .4 and supports the 3 BSD schools, will come and be the LEA at our IEP meetings, will certainly support families and needs for children, absolutely be able to answer questions at IEP meetings, so that's the current role of that facilitator.
We are, as part of restructuring our approach to special ed, also working with this agency of education to do some more training for skills in facilitation and coordination of IEP meetings for each building. So we'll be doing, with existing staff, some training on that.
Donna, you mentioned one team in schools, and I'm sure in your investigation of everything, are you, I guess, assuring us that one team is going to be able to cover all the needs of the students with autism in the 3 schools?
Yeah, we really do feel confident. When we look at a detailed analysis of those students who are identified and where they are, we're really feeling confident that if we have that nucleus that is going to concentrate on those children and only those children, that would be very supportive to all 3 buildings.
I still have concerns because I know we have a problem with we need to educate our staff on autism and different things that go along with autism, but we still hear a lot of complaints from people that have children with developmental disabilities and special needs, and I'm not sure that we're looking at them. I think we're more looking at autism and we're not.
Well, and if I may interject, this team that works as a nucleus for those students does allow our other special educators to focus on their caseload that they'll have. You know, I think that part of it right now is it's such a difficult stretch that special educators may have larger caseloads, they're spending, their time is really split. So this is a supportive measure to not only support the special educator to do the job for those students, but also the job for the other students who are also identified that may not have that disability category with autism.
So if we make these cuts, you can guarantee me that next year I'm not going to have a family member coming here?
I can't guarantee anything.
Can't guarantee
I can't guarantee anything. But I will say.
No guarantees.
Hang on a second, can I just, and I know we're talking about reductions, but you need to understand, your special ed spending is still going to increase $650,000,
Right.
or 20% over what it is today.
Right.
So
Thank you, Rick.
I don't want the conversation to think that we're cutting off of where we are today. We're still growing at $650,000, 20%. I mean, that's a significant number. And the other thing that I want to bring up is, you know, the $90,000 of contracted services budget Donna talked about earlier, 26 of that is, for lack of a better term, a contingency. Because,
Yeah, I was just going to say.
because we identified what we knew was going to be real contracted numbers. And then we said, you know something,
Somebody could move in.
we're not naive to think that something's not going to pop up that we don't understand.
And I'm comfortable with the fact that if we've got money in that contingency, in the event that we're saying something that's not right, that we will be able to correct it without robbing another part of the budget.
And we can't guarantee it because we certainly can't foresee the future. And we never know what children may move into our district. That can be a shock and a surprise when you get the phone call and a student is registering in our district. And
a student who still would be welcome.
Absolutely. The student absolutely would still be welcome, but we need to prepare for them.
Mhm.
So we have the unknown that we always have to consider every year.
I know. Karen's got a hand up.
I just want to add, and Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, because I had a grandbaby this week, so I missed a couple days and a couple meetings. But I think that this team that we're also talking about, we talked about it as being for children with complex disabilities. So the BCBA, for instance, if we had a child that didn't have autism but had complex disabilities, that team could also be a resource for people like you're talking about, Jackie, with, developmental disabilities, maybe not an autism diagnosis, but one that needs that real specialized, individualized look, that they could also help support that educational team, educational team as well.
And it is very cost effective because currently now it's a contracted service.
Right.
We have individuals who are coming in and providing this role as a board certified behavior analysis that is not cost effective. If we can hire our own employee that has that certification and can do that job, it's a tremendous savings.
And in time and scheduling as well.
Yeah, and they are an employee. Then they are working with us as a team instead of an outside contracted service. And I think the other thing to also remember is that person that is helping us this year, that contracted, that third party, is working with a variety of students. I work with them firsthand, and they do a fabulous job. So our goal is to be able to have the employee in our district that we work with every day, not just a portion of time. So the savings is tremendous.
Are we down to that last part?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to, before we get into that last part, I wanted to make a pitch to the board. I am individually not going to be voting to approve any of these cuts that go below, which include instrumental music and the rest of these positions down below. But I want to just say this to the board to tell you where I'm coming from. At the last board meeting, Ken brought up, and I was also brought up, the going to the supervisory union and asking for a reduction of certain positions, and Rick gave us a percentage of that. So what I'm saying is, I'd like the board to spend some time this evening, and instead of our cutting music and phys ed and all of that out of our program, I'd like to go back to the supervisory union, but only if I got the approval of this board, to ask them to make some cuts on those positions that we talked about, so that we can keep our program intact. I made a plea to the supervisory union that if we lost our budget, that we would go back to them and ask for something. I do not approve gutting these positions out of our program. I really feel strong about that. But I can only go back to the supervisory union if I get the permission of the board to do that. But certainly, before we ever start even talking about cutting these positions, I'd like that opportunity to go back there and make that plea. I just don't see cutting these jobs out or even talking about it, but that's where I'm coming from.
I want to hear the information behind it. I'm not disagreeing with having a discussion and having that open to go back to. I don't even know if we want to go all the way down to the 9.85%. I mean, there's things in here that we're going to have a general discussion on.
Yes.
What stays in, what doesn't stay in, and this is going to get redefined to be some percentage.
I'm with
but
you.
I would like to have the information behind what they thought or discussed in these areas. I'm not saying I'm advocating to cut these or to act on any of these, but I'd like to hear the reasoning on this side of the fence, and then we also have the information to decide what we're going to present to the HU. That's all.
I just want to clarify for the audience, I know you guys all had this, hopefully it was clear to you in your packet, but these reductions are prioritized based on the administration's least desirable last, I guess is the best way to say it. In the first section, and unfortunately, I don't know how many people in the public actually have this document, but the first section, which ends at the out-of-district replacements, which is a total of $421,000. Those are real easy cuts. We're going to take no matter what because we have more information today than we had on January 31st. My recommendation, you don't need to have a conversation. Just, they're not needed. Based on what we know today, they're not needed. The second section that we just went through, principals help me out if I say this wrong, but those are groupings that nobody really likes, but we can live with. We prefer not to see it happen, but if we have to, we can live with it. The bottom section is nobody supports, but it's the only way we could get you to what your directive was of below 10%.
Except we could take a couple of that business that we talked about at the last meeting.
If the board changes their position.
That's right.
Yes.
And that's my plea to them tonight when we get to that point later on in the evening.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Paul, you want a quick review of those
Yeah, just what,
things at the bottom?
What are these? What's involved in there? Yeah, I mean, it's here. They went through the troubles. I mean, be naive, not ask for it.
Okay.
So I'm going to do the last section here. You heard a wonderful plea from Caitlin Shaw to keep our instrumental music in there, and we do absolutely agree with that. One thing that I would like to mention that research shows that children who take instrumental music, 19% of those students score higher in English than the regular population. We see a 17% increase in math scores, and children are taking music, their brains are more active, so that would be important for us to keep our instrumental music. The homeschool liaisons at Bennell and Molly, both of these positions have really enhanced our attendance this year, our tardiness. We both currently have social workers in that position. They are making great connections with families, engaging families, getting the parents into the buildings, and that, of course, helps with academic progress as well. And I would remind you that we did sort of already cut this down at one time, so that would be another piece. PE is next. We currently in all of our schools have PE 2 times a week. We would be cutting our PE program down to 1 time a week. At Molly Stark, it would become a .8 position rather than a 1.0 position. And then it would be a shared position between Bennell and Monument for a 1.0. We currently have a 1.4 now. Our library position, all of the positions at Molly will go from a 1.0 to a 0.8, so our library would go down to a 1.8. Currently now shared, not shared, but at Bennell there's a 1.0, at Monument there's a 1.4. We'd cut that position to be a shared position down to a 1.0, so we'd be cutting the 1.4 position out of that. General music would be the same, going from a 1.4 between Bennell and Monument to a 1.0 at Molly Stark, cutting down to a 0.8. And art would be a cut of 0.8 at Molly Stark, and Bennell and Monument currently share at a 1.0, and they would remain in that position. We would all have to go to a 6-day cycle, which would be okay, but in order to provide all of this instrument, music, art, PE, library for our students, we would see a reduction in the actual minutes that we're providing now. So Molly Stark currently is providing 50 minutes in a 6-day cycle. We would have to look at cutting that down to about 48 minutes rather than the 50 in order to get all of our classes in. So as Rick said, we absolutely do not advocate for any of those cuts. The arts are something, and certainly PE, where some students who struggle academically might excel in one area of the arts, be it music or the art. Library provides a lot of additional support for our students, so we would really be saying have some academic impacts if we have special success.
I agree with George myself, and looking at these, I would rather, see all of these things stay in the budget and ask the SVSU to make some cuts, because these are all directly related to kids here.
Donna, you said in some, I couldn't keep up with all the numbers. Sorry. I couldn't keep up with all the 1 points and points and this and that. Two things that you said in there. Everybody could go to a 6-day schedule. Is there anything identified in doing that creates efficiencies amongst the districts to do that anyways? Maybe there's not any because of the cut to this, but is there an efficiency that is created out of doing that?
We can't currently.
Well, I think there's a couple of different questions that you're asking. The advantage that Molly has found in doing a 6-day cycle is really sort of twofold. If Friday is a day 5 and it happens to be a snow day, Monday picks up to be the day 5. So whatever was scheduled on that day is not missed. Whether it's a special, whether it's special ed services. The problem with currently that you share with another district, so it would be hard for you, you couldn't do that now. The other piece that we find at Molly, because we have 6th grade levels, we use that as collaboration tool. So we coordinate our specials so that our classroom teachers, title teachers, and special educators all have a specific day. Day 1 is 1st grade collaboration, and that they're allowed to, they're covered, kids are in specials, so they're not losing academic time. So there is an efficiency there for us.
You can't because you don't have enough FTE.
I share special teachers with a different district, and I also share with Jim, with Bennington Elementary School, so we're unable to do the 6-day schedule because of that. You just can't count.
Responsibilities at the other schools.
They have to be at their schools on certain days, so if it was a 6-day schedule, it wouldn't work out.
Was a 6-day schedule, how would it be beneficial to get to a 6-day schedule by doing something differently within our own district, or however we're getting services from, I don't know if it's in another district, it's going to be an SU service, so is there...
Certainly the advantage is what Donna described for, if we're out of school for inclement weather, you're not missing that day's schedule because it's the next day and you rotate through. So you're not having to do
there's no services
compensatory services.
Monument, Bennell, and Molly that are conflicted because
She has all her own service work.
One's at a time. Because I was affected by it. That's why I bring up the 6-day schedule versus whatever and dysfunction.
And I would.
No, I'm definitely against cutting anything at the bottom. In fact, there's a number of things even in the middle. I go back to the citizen that commented, we have to get it down to where the original was. It's an education to put some of this stuff back in. It's an education to the community to say, hey, this is what we need. This is where it is. I still think part of the reason that the budget went down originally was because the addition was high.
they didn't understand that that was a separate issue to
Right.
be brought later.
Right. So, you know, I even think, I'm really against getting rid of the crossing guards. I just think that's an accident waiting to happen. One kid gets injured, and you're looking at $10,000 that you cut. You know, there's certain things there that are in this middle part that I really think need to be looked at. And as was said, that I think with some advocacy and some education, that, you know, we don't have to get it down to now.
Yeah, Kelly, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that the principals and the administrators have done a great job in what they've given tonight, and I want to compliment them on all the work that they've put here.
They did.
And I appreciate it. And I think that we can also do a little bit more fine tuning in order to add back into that. And Rick, are we time-wise, are we all right that are we at the point where we still have some time to do a little bit more work on this?
Yes and no. It's a function of how you want to promote it. I mean, if you want 30, 45 days to promote, have 2 or 3 public forums and do letters and do things, you know, we're going to have to settle on a budget so you know what you're promoting. From a strict timeline, you really only need 7 days. But I'm not sure, based on this environment, that that's wise. I mean, I think you need some time to communicate what your business plan is, for lack of a better description. You know, the crunch time comes June 30th. And we have to have a budget time June 30th, otherwise it's very cumbersome. It's 87% of this year's budget. And that's going to be very painful to a lot of people. And that's going to be a lot of riffs going out on May 15th. You know, the other risk that you have is, depending on when you schedule that vote, there may still need to be some riffs going out, not knowing if that vote's going to pass. You know, unfortunately, the contract has tied us, you know, to some hard dates that we need to abide by. So I think you want to leave yourself enough time. I know I'm not answering your question, but I think you need to leave yourself enough time to educate the public, but you got to do it quick enough so we can try to beat some of these hard dates we have.
Excuse me. I'm just wondering at this particular point if we could get a discussion going with the board on whether or not we've got permission to go back to that supervisory union to get a little money out of them. Because I think that, let me say this, I think we're very close to being able to put this thing together, but I'd still like to take another crack at that.
And that's fine, and I'm, you know,
It's the 24th
disagree,
of
and I
April.
don't necessarily agree. The problem is that they don't meet until what?
24th of April.
24th of April. And, you know, as it is.
Well, I suppose we could still go back there with it and not have that tie this budget up. If we get it, we get it, and if we don't get it, we don't get it.
No.
Say that again?
Well, no, you got to be able to explain to the public what you're doing. I mean, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying, if you want to go back to the SU on the 24th, you know, we can have most everything else put in place and just wait for that final number. But you're going to want to set a date. You now are definitely riffing teachers on May 15th.
Oh, yeah,
There's not enough time
absolutely.
at that point in time to warn. And if you want to do education, I mean, you could do it. You could go to the 24th, 7 days later, you could have a budget on the street, and you hope it passed. But if you want an education period between the 24th and the vote, you're going to be ripping people on the 15th.
Or we could request a special meeting of the supervisory union.
You
To
could.
act on that.
You could. And they may actually
I think
need
it's
one.
worth a shot.
Depends on your relationship with the chair.
Well,
Well,
I
we
think,
might actually
I
need
think it would go if the board all got behind it. And we requested that to that one item.
Are you going back to just the list we talked about last?
Right, Ken?
No?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just a list. Wait a minute. The question I had, have they finished the presentation? We keep cutting in. And I really, I mean, it's their recommendation, and that's why I was surprised that there was, I mean, they seem to be cutting things to the bone. And I don't think we want to micromanage the programs.
No, I think it was a direction from the board.
Yeah, please remember that these proposals, this was a graduated list to meet your directive of 9.9.
Well, we didn't vote on it, right?
Yes, we did. No, you didn't.
I think it was a consensus.
Well, well, no.
Rick asked for a number, no one spoke up, I spoke up.
The one thing I haven't heard yet is that what impact did that sequester have on this budget? And it is a one-time thing this year.
Oh,
and
no,
what is that
it's
amount?
not. Rick had some more information from, that it was not going to be a one-time. Is that correct, Rick?
Yeah, no, it's, they're forewarning us that, you know, we need to expect at minimum 5% reductions in federal funds over the next, over the foreseeable future.
What's the impact on this budget? The one we're talking about?
Well, I gave you that. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Early on.
I gave you that a bunch of meetings ago. Somebody ask another question while I look this up.
You probably have the answer to that. I have a question, I guess. So throughout the year, different things pop up and what have you, and we just had an example of it where we were going to do an expansion here, investigate and spend money to do an expansion here. We had discussions earlier on to install a generator here and recommendations to do these, and there was money that was there to spend, do this. Where does that money come from throughout the years when they're not planned or itemized things that are in the budget to pay for those, or to say the money's there? Where is that, and have we looked at those spots that create that abundance of money? So if there's, you know, we were gonna, I can't remember what the numbers were, but.
For both of those items, obviously was the first one the addition?
Yeah. The first one, yeah, those are the two examples. We had a generator that we were gonna try to install.
The generator was gonna come out of your reserve fund. You have a reserve fund, 50,000, the voters approved it, I don't know how many years ago, a number of years ago. 50,000 goes into it each and every year. You have some amount of money, I'm not gonna guess because I'm not guessing wrong. You know, so that's where that generator money was going to come from. There's still 50,000 going into that in this budget. It goes into a reserve fund for future building needs, whether it's a roof, windows, a generator, you know, and it's at total discretion of the board. We can't touch it, I can't touch it, the superintendent can't touch it. You have to direct us to tell how to spend it. That's your question?
You did, and that's where the money would come for spending on, like that, when we were going to, the architectural engineering fees that we were spending in process this budget. Where would that money come from, or did that?
That was coming from, largely, that was coming from kindergarten position that we had at Molly Stark that we did not fill. So theoretically, if, as I explained before, we don't need that fifth Molly Stark, you would theoretically have somewhere about $75,000.
So it's vacancy savings that you had, basically.
Unallocated.
Okay.
And if I could just reiterate, because I actually am concerned, as Rick did say, this was an agonizing task. We spent hours and hours and days on this, and we really want the board to understand that we did this with the understanding that it was to really meet that directive of 9.9. It's just really hard to get here. And we really felt that it was important to really create the subsets for that reason that Rick also said that, yes, the top was, we found that. Also, Rick really helped us a great deal with this. But that middle, we're not comfortable with it. But, it's not that we're happy with that. But if we had to live with it, we understand we have to live with it. And of course, the bottom, we don't want it.
No.
At all.
We don't either.
So you want to talk about opening up the FBSU budget? Thank you.
Well, you know, if the board says they don't want to, that's fine by me. I'm not going in unless we got the votes to do it.
I think we should.
Yeah, I thought we postponed it because it wasn't
Yeah.
enough
Yeah, but
for what we were
arguing
talking
pretty
about,
heavily.
and we weren't prepared because
Right.
at the last meeting, Rick wasn't prepared to talk about the things we just talked about. And so I think now is the time to have the
And
conversation.
just so you know, if we're talking about those same items, which total 377 is a round number, reductions in the SU, BSD will see 0.86% reduction on their budget. So if you need more, if you're looking for more, you need to go deeper than what we talked about last time.
Can you write that list off?
Cutting $20,000 in tuition reimbursement. Cutting $20,000 in curriculum material. Eliminating the HR position, which is unfilled and wasn't planned to be filled until January of next year. Eliminating a file clerk, which is I think a .6 position that's unfilled, doesn't exist now. There's a general $50,000 reduction in staff consolidations at the SU, and I can't get into a whole lot of detail there because of what I was reading. And then a $208,000 reduction in the PLUS program.
Budget amount.
It was level funded.
It's level funded.
It was
That
level funded.
207 represents a level funded if you cut
Right.
that.
Level funding.
0.86%.
So as George said, we need a consensus as to this board's feelings for us to go back to the SVSU and request that.
And that's fine, but I want to make sure you finish the conversation of what's in front of you.
Oh, I think they've done a great job on this, explaining everything.
Well, I know, but, I heard various people around the table say, I don't like that, I don't like it. I'm just saying, and you can do what you want to do, but from the administration, it's from the bottom up. So if someone doesn't want the, the crossing guards as example, and they,
9,000.
we're recommending that everything below crossing guards stay in. Now, obviously, you can say, no, put the crossing guards in, take everything else out. That's your prerogative, but I just want you to understand that our recommendation is these are progressive in priority from the building level
Can
position.
you tell me, if you take the top, which I kind of go along with, most of it.
Well, the top is,
It's gone.
The top is real. You don't, that's a no-brainer. I mean,
Okay.
we have better information today than we had
did.
January 31st.
All right, and you take the bottom out, that we're gonna keep that. All right, we're gonna keep that, but we're taking the top out. How many percent is that?
15.29.
Your growth would be 15.29 over this year's budget.
Oh,
Right, it's progressively, if you just take the
Oh,
top
okay.
out, this is what you're
I
at.
should have known that. Sorry.
And 5% of that is the sequestered?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find that spreadsheet, Claude. I haven't forgotten you. I'm still
Okay,
looking,
I
I'm
understand.
still looking for it.
2 9.
Well,
So right, so I guess
It's gonna go
where
down
it's
to 14%.
maybe,
it's at 14%, so I guess that's, so we're saying that what are we saying we want to do here? I mean, because if we're still just gonna say we're gonna go back to get that 0.86% to achieve what percentage?
Yeah.
Well, are we definitely saying we're scrapping the top based off the recommendations? Are we gonna go through and say, no, just because it seems to be the word we're using, crossing guard, that's gonna stay or it's not gonna stay, and pick and choose out of here to determine, are we at 15.2% or are we at 12.3 or where are we at, and decide on that, and then the education process that we gotta do with the town and put it out there.
I think Rick convinced everybody that the top part, and with the administrators, is gone. I haven't heard anybody say we really want to cut anything instrumental and below that, so that's out. So the only thing left for discussion is the center part, I would assume.
Yes.
Right.
So, going back to what Kat.
Now, Rick, did you need us to make solid decisions tonight or next
It's the
Wednesday?
It's the board's prerogative. I mean, if you're concerned about the timeline and what you want to do for educating the public, you know, with the context of, you know, deadlines for RIF and staff.
It's April 15th.
May 5th.
May 5th. But if we wait till next week, in other words, if we go home this evening and digest those center items, and we come back prepared to each item down the line, yay or nay on each one, next Wednesday, we could basically put this to sleep. And we would know exactly what's staying in and what isn't staying in. And about that Mount Anthony, excuse me, the SVSU assessment, if we decide that what's in there, say we brought it down to 12 and a half, including some cuts here in the middle, and the board's consensus was 12 and a half is good enough to send out to the public, let's go with that. I mean, we could do something like that, or they could say, well, instead of 12 and a half, let's go back to the SU and bring it, you know, another % down or something like that. But I think we did a lot of work tonight. I think this top part gone, stay with this.
Well,
we just have to decide on that middle part.
why don't we, just to move this thing, why don't I make a motion on that bottom section so we get that out of the way and not worry about it? I'd like to make a motion that we not touch anything on that lower level
Or the top.
and the top. So
No,
then-
no, the top's gone.
All right, well, yeah, but, all right.
We're not gonna keep it.
So that's
Right.
gone. So I'd like to make a motion, if a motion is needed, that we not look at instrumental music, homeschool liaison, phys ed, library, general music, and art.
Right,
Do I have a second on that?
I second it.
Oh, wait a minute. Your motions have to be in a positive.
Yes, they did.
We did.
You said not.
You
What
have
is
to
the
say,
purpose?
we will keep instrumental music.
Yeah.
But what is
keep
the
all
point of
these.
making a motion? We already have a consensus here.
Well,
that we're not gonna do it.
because it just clears it out of the way so we can get moving on the rest of this
I'll
stuff.
recommend that's a good idea because
Well, it's because of
considering where
misdirection.
you'll get next week, you'll get confused if you don't have your
Right.
motions
Yeah.
in chunks of what you've done and what you
Let's
haven't
not
done. And
touch
it
it.
helps Rick keep a running
Call the
record.
question.
To take a motion to keep all of these, a positive motion
call
to
the
keep from
question.
instrumental music through art, we'll just keep a running record of what your actions are, that's all. It helps
Positive.
us keep a running record.
Okay, George
Call the
made a
question.
motion to keep those 6 items in the lower
And it
part.
validates the staff that's doing it.
And
Okay,
because
we have a second.
we do not have a secretary here, we're going to keep instrumental music,
Right.
home
Just
school
write it down there.
liaison, physical education, library, general music and art.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Just to take them off there
Right.
because we want to say something in front of that camera? That's what we're doing? All right, that's what I'm getting the impression, that's really my feeling right now.
I see what you're
Is that this is
saying.
a show for the public,
Right, 'cause
that we're just going to make a decision on this just because we want to say we're going to preserve that program. And I don't think that that's the approach that we ought to take right now. If we're going to talk about this budget and all the items that are on it, then they all ought to be in play and have that discussion. It doesn't matter whether we make
As
the
a
motion
whole,
now
is what you're
or
saying.
next week.
I'm just trying to clarify this thing out so that next week when we meet, because I think where the argument's gonna be is on that middle section. And I just wanna find out, vote it down if you don't.
I'll give
agree
you
with
my
it.
opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need to have a vote to take it off there because information can come out and we can change and have a different discussion next week. I think we're doing this for the wrong intentions.
Right, I think we're compounding the misdirection we gave the principals. I'd much rather have the principal come back and say what they want and what will fulfill their mission as opposed to the misdirection we gave them on coming to a specific number.
Did you read the memo?
Well, they've said that.
The memo's right there. It tells you exactly where the
No,
principals
I
are coming
think you're
from.
making a different point,
No, because-
Claude.
No, because
Claude is making a different
what the
point.
administration wants to fulfill the mission is everything left in below that first section. Right?
That's his
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Well, no, what the administration wanted was what we
But that's
put
his
out
point.
for our first vote.
Right, but we now have information to know that first section isn't needed.
Right.
Right.
Right, so we're at
Well-
15% right now, because you guys did a great job reevaluating, found things that didn't need to be done there.
And we had more
we did.
information.
Right, exactly.
I mean, we have better information today than we had in,
So if we want to have, take the passion you have in this meeting right here, right now, and say 15% is what we want, and then put the effort into the next month, and have every meeting that you got to have, and talk to all the, go to your AARPs, go to your select board meetings, go wherever you want to go and voice that this is what we got to have because of this, this, and this. I mean, we haven't had that discussion to say, you know what, maybe that's what we ought to do. And you're right, we leave this, we leave everything there. But we want to voice an opinion on getting rid of, or saving this. Still adamantly say we want to go back to the SU because we don't like the way the sand has been distributed. For what purpose? I don't understand that. And I need to understand it if I'm going to vote.
Well, the people that I've talked with just cannot believe we hit double digits as an increase in the budget. And I'm afraid if we make a small 15.29, it won't go. And then we're getting in this time constraint. As Rick said, if you don't have it won by June 30th, what's going to happen is you're going to only get 87% of what you get this year.
You're not going to be able to educate the public if you don't go through this with a fine-tooth comb and truly understand what we're affecting, how we're doing. If we just vote on this because of a timeline, if we don't bleed this, as George would say, and know this in and out with a voice, we're not going to be able to sell it to the town next week, 6 months from now, or whenever, and we're going to have this great big mess.
So I don't see what a problem is to, come back on next Wednesday and discuss all of these items in the center, line by line, and take a vote, 7 votes on each item, and either up and down, go through the list.
You're applying a line item veto?
Yep, that's what we're talking about.
But I think that's Paul's point, is to come back and take it as a whole, rather than making a motion now to
The bottom ones?
make an action, just to make an action, or...
Well, I don't think he's making an action. I think he's making, saying that the board is really against these cuts. That's the way I see it. Just like mine against any of those cuts below. I think.
Well, let's put it this way, Ken. I'm really against the cuts below, but I'm against a lot of cuts up here too. So if I have to make a choice, I'm going to make a choice for all the kids, not just a few.
No, every kid takes all those. These are a few. The ones in the middle represent a few. The ones at the bottom represent everybody.
But them are the ones that need the most.
Go in the center.
Yeah, but some like regular subs and, and I think we always have to keep in the back of our mind, as Rick mentioned, that, we're cutting some of these sped items because we're rearranging the sped program. It's going to be more efficient. And again,
until they can prove it,
but we have
I'm not
to take the word
to that, because we do not have IMPs in place. We do not have. I have heard this over and over for the last 6 months on this board. All these things are not in place, and you're not going to tell me because they sat down for the last 2 or 3 weeks that they've got it all solved.
That's a different issue than the issue. Yeah, Jackie, that's a different issue.
That's why I was trying to clean this thing up a little bit so that we could devote our time to the middle section.
So let's talk about the middle section. Nobody here wants to discuss the bottom section. Nobody wants to discuss the bottom section. Let's talk about the middle.
Ken.
All right. Jerry.
I'd just like to say, everybody's talking about the top line, it's a given. Everything on there except for my custodial position is not people. So on the top line, you're talking one person. You're not talking nothing. You're not talking given. I just want to say that all these items, in mine, you're talking me not hiring a person for a while. Okay? So I just want that understood. Thank you.
Need to advocate.
All right.
Sam, you got a question?
Sam Pereira, I live up on Elm Street. I just want to make one quick point on the crossing guard. We love up on Elm Street, I guess I just said that. There once was a time we'd send our kids out. They'd have to walk about a mile. They'd have to cross the main road. We wouldn't worry at all. Now we barely send them out to the post office because we're concerned about something happening. So, it goes to your point. I don't have kids in school anymore. Now I'm going off on another topic. And you might say, very self-serving topic. But I've heard you people talk tonight, and you've all done a nice job. I don't know if any of you said anything that's convinced me one way or the other, because I haven't understood everything you were saying. I should know, I was in education for 35 years, but things have changed. So what do I know about education? I know who won the Mount Anthony game last night. And I know what my school taxes were. And so I go to that point as you're going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. What impact, and this is self-serving, what impact does step 1, step 2, step 3 have on my property taxes? Maybe that's a ridiculous question to ask, but without children, my grandchildren go to school someplace else, how much am I going to have to pay? I have to trust you people as my elected representatives that you're going to make decisions about what's best for the kids. I have to trust you. But what I do know is how much I'm paying in property taxes. Now, I didn't see too many senior citizens here tonight. And you know, I don't get a paycheck anymore. And so I have to watch the bottom line. And so as I consider all these different steps, I'm saying, how much is that going to cost me? Can I afford it? And all these things, and especially special education, I'm extremely concerned about that in terms of offering the best we can for those kids, because this is their last chance. I was in a classroom someplace along those 35 years after being an administrator a long time. Boy, did I appreciate the help of the special education teacher. So I can't tell you how important I feel about that. But I'm wondering if, as you're coming up with these different recommendations, you might be saying to the public, such and such a program is going to cost you X number of dollars on a $100,000 house, X number of dollars on a $200,000 house. And then my wife and I, after seeing these recommendations, will make a decision. Yeah, I think we can afford that. Our school board is recommending it. We've got to trust them. And we feel that we can afford that. Now, maybe that's too much dollars and cents, and some of you are saying that's the babbling of an old man, and all he's concerned about is money. And maybe I am. But I'd like to see some dollars and cents attached to some of these programs. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. 19% sounds right out of this world. Right out of this world. I don't know if 13 or 14 sounds much better, but sincerely, I don't know what it's going to do to my property tax. Maybe it won't be as bad as I'm thinking. And if you can convince me that it's really needed, okay. I've never voted against a budget before. I did this last time. 18%, folks? What's happening? And people tell me that it's going up in another year? I don't know. Well, anyway, connect some of those recommendations to dollars and cents, and then I'll make a decision as to how I want to go at 218 Elm Street. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Joe. And Sam. I always get, two guys, one was Joe.
Joe was on the board.
And I always called him Joe. And the other guys say that.
So does that sound okay if we meet next week and everybody come prepared to either defend or whatever their feelings on all of those in the middle? We accept the top as being gone, and Paul wants to just keep the other ones at the bottom in the mix.
Yes and no. I mean, you got to have, I think you got to look at these. I mean, that is a person that's affected there in that maintenance position. Just to say the top, I mean, Jerry, it was great that he had the courage to say something, right? You got to say something for those that don't have a voice. So I think we have to have a constructive conversation about all of these items. Can we lump a lot of them together? Absolutely. But should we take a moment to really reflect on that maintenance hire and how does that impact that? Perhaps no different than we have to make a conscious decision on whether we want to tell the SU we want to cut that HR person out of there. Maybe that person's not hired there, neither is the HR. They're both impacting a person somewhere. So each one has to have the same respect when we go through it. That's all I'm asking this board.
George, will you go back?
Oh, sure, I'll withdraw. It doesn't bother me.
Second, Marie?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. Cross-site. Okay, we'll leave everything for the table and next, no, we will all be prepared for discussion because we've got all the backup and material. We were well informed on everything here.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, President.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, I do have a question on, in regards to these middle parts with the special education. Will you be at the meeting next week?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Then I'm comfortable, I'll wait till then.
What day we meet?
7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th.
We're meeting at 6.
We're meeting at 6, the rest of the board and the
Yeah,
regular board is
executive
7.
session at 6 and then the regular meeting.
Central office?
Central office.
What's the date?
10th.
10th?
Jackie, you're gonna get me your evaluation.
No, I'm gonna take a day off.
Okay, no, it's good. I'm glad.
I'm honored,
Can I
Jackie.
make,
I'm honored that you would spend that
can I
long.
make a recommendation?
You bring this
Yes.
back to a fight, I'm gonna kick you.
Gee, thanks. No, just anticipating, based on the crowd we had today,
Yep.
we're not gonna be able to accommodate a lot at central office. Don't anyone take this personally, I hate the acoustics at Molly Stark Gym, but I think that's
good room.
Oh, was it enough? Did we have enough space for everybody?
This is a nice room to me.
Put the drum set away.
Stay here.
Either here or Monument.
Use the
Monuments.
cafeteria at
I
Monument.
think the acoustics are better in either one of these two.
I think so too. Well, this is the best acoustics you've got.
Let's
But I
go.
just don't know if there's enough space for everybody.
Let's meet here.
Right here.
It's the board's pleasure, I'm just
Okay.
making a suggestion.
Yep.
Jim, can we meet here? Absolutely. Okay.
You own the building.
The rest of us,
Is that okay?
we'll meet at 6 in the art room. Okay, 6 in the art room.
Can't wait to bring this on.
Okay, committee meeting.
Claude, I can't find it, I'll have it for you next week. I'll have it for you next week.
Thank you.
Get back there.
Put that on the to-do list?
Is there anything for technology? I don't
Did you
think
put that
they meant, did they know?
And nothing for food
Nothing
service.
for
Food
food service.
service is gonna be.
Okay, under Chair's report, here's a board of, code of ethics that I'd like you just to read, digest, and we'll try and, I'll ask you if you'll sign it next week. We'll bring in one nice master copy to hang up, a copy of each in the building, but just read it and tell me if you have any problems with it.
You sent it home with us anyway.
Okay, but, I don't have the copy ready to read. You have none.
Were you gonna pass,
No reduction of paper here.
were you gonna pass out those two alternates? There were two that were presented at the SVSU?
No, this is it. This is the one that's a generic. This is a
Yeah,
nice
but
cleaned
Claude,
up one.
Claude
No, no.
said there was a rewrite
There was
from
a
one of the
rewrite.
members of
Is this a rewrite?
No, this is
we're not-
the
No, no.
association.
Okay, we'll get
So
to the
maybe
rewrite.
table it.
Because
Maybe
I
just
read that, it
table
was
it.
very good.
Okay,
It's
we'll,
very good?
Yes.
okay, we'll get to that one.
You just have
All right, I need that one then.
Did anyone have any changes on your addresses?
Your data sheet?
Any changes? Okay.
Okay, the other thing is, next Tuesday, the VSBA training session, I'm pretty sure it's at 5 o'clock at the CDC.
I absolutely agree.
Okay, and one other thing, lo and behold, I didn't realize this, but I found out last week, is that we work well with Mount Anthony. There was a performance put on at Monument School, and Mount Anthony delivered a truckload of risers for our singers at the school, and they brought them, our custodians set it up, and then returned, and it's really nice to see that, where we don't have to buy a whole set of risers, that if we need them for 2, 3, 4 performances, we can just request them from Mount Anthony, and we have them. And then we don't have the storage problem either, because we had those, I don't know where we'd even put them over at Monument School. So they'll deliver them here, they'll deliver them whatever. And I spoke to Mr. Marsden up there, and he said that he lends us a thing called a Genie as well. If some of the districts in the SVSU need one of those high risers, and I think it's really good to see stuff like that happening within the SVSU.
It is good.
And may I also add that Mr. Prue does that coordination. He is wonderful at helping us to coordinate that with the Mount Anthony staff and Darlene over at the middle school. We really are very thankful for them doing that, and the chairs. It really is a big, I know,
Yeah, those are expensive to buy sets of those.
yes. So I do
Yeah,
want
I
to
didn't
send out
realize
an
it till last
additional
week I
thank you.
found out, and I thought that was really nice that we do that.
Yeah, it's a great partnership.
exactly.
No, we're not. There's an executive session.
Okay, you
for
also
just a
have
few
student
minutes.
enrollment and the BSD letter that we sent to Mount Anthony check-in with the 5th grade, so they've got that.
They'll be on that.
They did get that letter?
Last
It's
meeting.
going to be on the next meeting.
Okay, task list review. Clive?
What?
Okay, what we have here is all contact information for all boards, members, for
Sure,
for a
that's
list, and I've assigned that to the superintendent for April 10th. And
I don't know who does it, so I told him you did.
that was the recommendation by my predecessor.
Well, wait a minute,
No,
I got,
for all the
this is the task, because I got it, wait a minute. Ken, I wanted, do we hit the other on all that agenda yet?
You know, you'll do that on the other, yeah.
All right, because it's going to get added to that.
No, you want to say something under others. Remember you in the other room?
I do, but it's going to
It's gonna
require
be
action.
It's gonna be
It's
a
gonna
thing.
require
Oh, all right.
actions.
Okay, I'll wait.
Let's do other comments.
Okay.
Okay. Other comment.
All right, so I would like, because it is time for the review process and everything for contract personnel, superintendent, administrators will be coming down the road. I would like a couple of reports. One is,
You have to speak up
Yeah,
a little bit,
yeah.
Paul, for me.
let me just get my notes here. One report, I prefer for all of the BSD staff, but I prefer at minimum the direct administrators. Basically a report that states the date of hire, position held, the dates of their last 2 written reviews and when they were done.
Yep, I actually put that on their evaluations.
Okay, I would like to have, if I could have that information early next week as part of my evaluation process, to know that information.
Well, I would give it to the whole board.
That's fine.
We'd
However,
have to, if the whole board wants that information.
and
And
then-
I will be reporting on this, Fels, at the next meeting on the 10th in executive session,
Why didn't you tell me all this?
the principals.
Okay. And then the other thing is can I get a absentee report on all the BSD employees? As
all
far
the
as
BSD
absenteeism report
Of
on
all employees.
of our BSD employees.
Yep.
And what that looks like.
And what I'll just say with that is that we have implemented last year a process of dealing with excessive absences with employees, so we have a very particular process that we go through.
Yeah, that's what brought it to my attention, is that we have that, and that's why I'm curious as the exact numbers, and I want to relate it to the, what we do, what is real.
You can always give me a call too when you have a question like that.
That's all.
I didn't realize that had been brought to your attention, but you can always call me. No, as long as the board is fine getting it, and you'll all get it.
Okay. Okay, Claudia.
Well, I'll include those reports, and I'll put them in for the 10th. How's that?
Yep.
And then we can update it from there. The other 2 items, Rick was going to get the information on the sequester. He thought he'd have it by the 10th for the next meeting. The Code of Ethics, we were going to get the copies of those updates, those rewrites for consideration.
I can't hear.
Did I miss anything?
No.
Yes, oh yeah, I have it.
Yes, you get it.
I just put it on the list.
Yeah,
I'm
please
just
do.
trying to be
Yeah,
thorough
I'll-
because my predecessor
It's very
been
thorough.
poking me.
She was very thorough.
She's adding to it.
So we'll get that out to the rewrite of the Code of Ethics.
There's more I missed?
I'm just finishing what you didn't write.
You know, I would have voted for you if you ran.
You asked me.
All right.
Thank you.
We need
Okay.
a very
Good
brief
enough.
5-minute
Any others coming
executive
from the
session.
board?
Make a motion for executive session.
More motion, second? Second. Second? All in favor?
Don't ask me again, I'm not helping you.